The map was too detailed to be a fantasy. It even had surnames on the doors, but the district had never existed. Pete, where would you like to wake up? The archive basement smelled of dust and cardboard. The ceiling fan wasn't working. Its blades just trembled lazily from the vibration of footsteps. Nina, an intern in the city planning department, had gone down at the request of her supervisor to find an old drainage plan, lost somewhere in the section labeled "Projects Not Approved for Implementation." The box was heavier than she expected. The metal handles dug into her palms. On the lid, a faded handwritten note, 1961 to 1970, rejected. She placed the box on the table, opened it, and sifted through folders filled with brittle blueprints. Highways, boiler stations, wastewater treatment, all dull and lifeless. And then one map folded neatly in quarters. Thin, almost translucent tracing paper. A neighborhood she didn't recognize. No name, no topography matched any part of the city. But the detail was unsettling. Tiny trees marked by green dots, pedestrian paths and dotted lines, and above each house, handwritten surnames. Real ones. Ordinary, Gomez, Alvarez, Mason. Next to the school, Teacher Eddie. On the bakery doors, Rose and Sons. Nina frowned. At first, she assumed it was some student project, but in the corner was an ink stamp. Conrad Vale, Department of Future Design. Date, June 1964. In the lower left corner, a faded note. Project rejected, does not align with city development strategy. She didn't notice the second sheet of paper at first, taped to the back. A table, dates, addresses, names, same handwriting, and next to each, brief phrases. She asked for the windows to face the sunrise. He dreamed of a yard with no cars. She said she wanted to sit by a fountain with a book. Nina ran her fingers over the notes as if they were fingerprints of voices, and she realized this wasn't just a map. It was someone's attempt to hear an entire city. Tom held the map with both hands like a fragile relic from a time that never was. He worked in the urban analysis department, a young specialist with a soft voice and a posture too upright to seem experienced. Usually his tasks were dull, generating heat maps, checking zone indices, counting trees per square meter. But that day, he'd stayed late in the archives because of Nina. He looked at the map and felt a strange tingle, like it reminded him of something forgotten. His whole childhood had been spent in a gray 9-story block. From his window, all he could see was concrete and more windows. Not a single tree. Not one street he'd want to walk down again. This map was different. Curved lines, gentle forms, comfort in the details. He thought, if I had a street like this growing up, maybe I would have become a different kind of architect. Look here, Nina said, pointing to a cluster of neatly drawn house rectangles. It says Paisley Street. Have you ever heard of it? Tom shook his head. No such name in the address database, nor in the old city maps. But the map showed numbered houses and surnames. He typed a few into the resident registry. Wait, this one, Oliver Gray. There's a match, but he lived on Berkeley Road about 20 years ago. They checked 3 more. One of them, Armando Cruz, had indeed lived in the city. Across town, back in 1987. The matches were too precise to be coincidence. But how, Nina whispered. These people lived in different times, in different places. Why are they all here, as if they were neighbors? They printed out a list of every name on the map and began following the trail. The first person they found was an elderly woman named Marjorie Ellis. Her name was next to the phrase, House by the Maple. Yes, that's my name, she said, peering at the map through a magnifying glass. But I've never lived in that neighborhood. Though, she paused. Funny. I used to dream of a house just like that. I even called it that. The House by the Maple. But it only existed in my head. Nina looked away for a moment. Among the phrases on the back of the map was one that read, Windows to the Sunrise. And at that moment, she remembered how her mother used to set the alarm for 6:10. Not because she had to get up, but just to catch the morning light as it touched the window frame. They'd lived in a one-room apartment then, but that minute of light made the morning feel bigger. Tom and Nina exchanged a glance. The map wasn't just a document, it somehow knew what people long for, even if they never said it aloud. The name Conrad Vale didn't appear in any current department records. Not in the staff lists, not in the project registries. But when Tom went to the HR office in the old building, the clerk, a woman with silver hair and folders instead of walls, looked up. Vale? Yes, there was someone by that name. Back in the 63. Strange fellow. Always carried a tape recorder. They used to call him the voice collector. They got permission to access the deep archive. Room 12, B. Metal cabinets with peeling labels and the smell of mildew. Inside, thick folders of blueprints, diagrams, and cassette tapes. One of the tapes had a label, "Listen only if it matters." Conrad Vale. Tom inserted it into a dusty cassette player. The hum of the tape, a click, and a voice. If you could choose, what would your courtyard be like? No cars, and a bench like my grandma's. You know, the wooden kind, under a cherry tree. Tom froze. The tone, the cadence. The voice reminded him of his father. His dad used to dream about a bench like that too. Told stories about it in the evenings, hands in pockets, staring out the window. But he never built one. The next tape. And you, Mrs. Ellis? I'd want windows facing east, so the morning sun lights up my book, not in the face, just from the side. Nina listened, holding her breath. Her first thought was, that's why I went into urban planning. Not for codes or zoning, just because she always wanted to know how places were made that could feel something, because she'd never really had one. None of her childhood moves left her feeling at home. These weren't structured interviews. They were intimate conversations, as if Vale simply sat beside people and asked, how would you like to live if you could? In another folder, sketches, parks, residential blocks, strangely cozy in their simplicity. No ads, low buildings, narrow paths. Labels next to each design, based on talk with RK, dream of Lieutenant M. At the bottom of the folder, a pencil note, Project Impossible. The city cannot be like this. People do not align their dreams. Tom closed the folder. He wasn't trying to build houses. He was trying to collect hope. Nina didn't answer right away. And maybe it's still here, just buried under dust. Late that evening, they were back in the archive. Tom set the tape recorder on the table, beside a notebook and 3 cassettes labeled private, unclassified, and simply dreams. The player clicked, the tape rustled. If there were stairs you could just sit on, not walk up. What do you mean? I don't know. Just sit. Not like at the subway. Not like waiting. More like being home, even if you're outside. Tom was writing down phrases. Nina was studying the blueprint. Vale didn't draw buildings. He drew gestures. The angle of a bench beneath a tree, 3 stairs with a wide step, a reading nook in the library where you could see the window, and a lit corner labeled, for those who want to be alone, but not in the dark. He wasn't designing a space, Nina whispered. He was designing a feeling, the certainty that there's a place for you, even if you say nothing. They discovered a bundle marked voice distribution, a table, who said what, how often themes repeated, light, quiet, the chance to slow down, children nearby, windows no one peeks into. It's a dream census, Tom said. He was looking for patterns, as if trying to prove that we share something. On the blueprint, the district curved like a half moon. At its center, a community garden. Along the arc, no buildings over 3 stories. Ground floors had cafes, libraries, workshops. Second and third, living space, almost no cars. Vale didn't sign it as the author. Just a small note in the corner. Based on oral stories of city residents, with gratitude for their trust. They looked at each other. No one would approve this, Tom said. Too personal, too quiet. But real, Nina replied, and maybe that's what scares them. Outside it was dark, but on the map the street lamp still glowed, drawn in soft yellow pencil, as if someone was waiting for them to be found. They found him by chance, in a small park near the old university building, an elderly man with thick white eyebrows feeding pigeons, gently shaking crumbs from a paper bag. Beside him on the bench lay a book with a bookmark, Architecture as Invitation. "Excuse me," Tom said, approaching. "Are you Arthur Lendon?" The man nodded without looking up. "We found a map. You're listed on it as a resident of a district that doesn't exist. It may sound odd, but—" "Paisley Green," Arthur interrupted. He finally raised his eyes. "I remember. A young man asked me back then to describe a perfect day. I thought, sure, why not? I told him, morning starts in a house with a terrace. I step out, it's quiet, smells like bread, no cars, newspaper stand on the corner, and a tree, big but not blocking the sky." "You didn't know he recorded it?" Nina asked. "Number. And I didn't think anyone cared. He just listened, truly listened. And I was tired back then. Everything felt temporary. Then suddenly someone asks not, 'Where do you work?' but 'How would you like to live?'" Arthur paused, then added, "Sometimes I imagine that district really existed, somewhere on the edge of town, or in the future, and that if I walk long enough, I'd get there." Nina pulled out the map. Arthur traced a familiar turn with his finger. "That's where I asked for stairs. I remember," he asked, "how many steps?" I said, 3, so a child could sit and swing their legs. "Were you the first to describe the place?" Number. He talked to everyone, elders, students, shopkeepers, nurses, and asked each one like their answer was the most important thing in the world. The three of them sat in silence. The park was ordinary, but within that silence came the quiet sense that something once spoken aloud could still remain, if someone had written it down. The first step was the park, not because it was easier, but because nearly everyone in Vale's tapes began with it. But before anything shifted, there was the meeting room. Gray chairs, yellow lights, an unloved Tuesday. "The project's not on the agenda," said the secretary, avoiding eye contact. "Why?" Tom asked calmly. "There's no department to take it on, and no budget line." An architect across the table smirked. "Sounds poetic, but who's paying for it?" Silence. One deputy asked, "Is this a creative initiative or something from the psychogeography section?" They didn't argue. They simply repeated like a mantra other people's words. "A bench where you don't need to talk. A yard without cars so kids can play safely. Steps that lead nowhere, but make you want to sit." The project was eventually admitted to the city forum. No promises, no funding. At first, no one believed them. Then, some began to listen, not all. "Is this nostalgia?" someone asked. "What if someone breaks the bench or sets it on fire?" People didn't want to believe that a bench under a maple could be serious. That steps for no purpose weren't a mistake, but a choice. They called the project the return of the dream, not as a slogan, but as an invitation. The fifth site was an old district where nothing had been built for years. There used to be a parking lot. It was removed. The maple was left standing. A brick path was added, slightly uneven, as in the notes. Benches without backs, one staircase with 3 steps, and lamps like the ones Vale had drawn, soft and warm. The opening was quiet. No ribbons, no microphones, no press. But on the second day, someone was already reading by the maple. A boy sat on the step, legs swinging. An old man tuned a radio on the bench, smiling as if he knew exactly why he was there. One maple didn't survive. Someone still parked right on the path. But people noticed. They talked about it, which meant something worked. Nina watched from the edge and whispered, "It's alive, without posters or speeches, just because someone once imagined it." Tom pulled out the old copy of the map. At the new park spot was a label, "Square of Morning Silence," by request of 3 people. He smiled. "Looks like we've started the city that never was." And perhaps in that city, people would finally stop saying, "That's not how the world works," because someone once had the courage to simply ask, "How would you like to live?" The bench stood in the shade of that very maple. It wasn't on any official plans. No department had ever approved it. It simply appeared, built from planks donated by neighbors, and a plaque nailed in silence early one morning. The plaque read, "Conrad Vale, architect of the impossible." No titles, no dates, just a name and recognition of what never existed until someone chose to believe. Nina came here on weekends, sometimes with a thermos, sometimes with a notebook. She watched the place breathe, children climbing the railings, teenagers playing chess on the steps, elders sitting in the half-shadow smiling at passers-by. No one rushed, and no one minded being alone. Sometimes the bench was empty, sometimes someone slept there. But in the morning, someone would come with a book, and it would begin again. One day a boy of about 8 sat next to her. He asked, "Why is this bench not like the others?" Nina thought for a moment and replied, "Because it was imagined by people who once dreamed, and one person wrote it all down." The boy nodded as if he understood, then suddenly said, "So it's a bench from memory?" She smiled, "From a dream, and then from action." He ran back to his friends, and all that remained was silence, in which Vale's words echoed, without tape, like a voice preserved in trees, in steps, in shadows. No more copies were made of the map. One survived, stained with coffee, with a pencil line traced by someone else's voice. It was no longer studied. It was opened, like a window. And on the table in the new project's office among blueprints lay a blank sheet. No title, no borders. Just one word, Torstarter, dreams. And it was enough for someone to stop and wonder, not about the future, but about themselves.